That's probably enough footage at the back of your head now.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
If you're filming,
Yeah.
The main carer's benefit is 58.
there are more seats over this side as well.
Oliver Thomas, the UK Director of Food for Care Homes, said some local authorities are pushing to cut fees by as much as 20%.
Brilliant.
More
Well,
than
we'll be back
700,000
in
people
about a minute.
at the age of 65 around the health, and campaigners warned the system will become stretched in the needs of the state. AGK warned that the cuts were forcing growing numbers of needy older people into a frightened, isolated life, as the services they relied on were gradually eroding.
Carers UK puts a funding gap near £1 billion.
Delivering dignity will mean changing the way we design, pay for, deliver and monitor care services. It also requires a major cultural shift in the way the NHS thinks about dignity to ensure care is person-centred and not task-focused.
Every day, another 6,000 people take on a care responsibility. That equals over 2 million people each year.
While the amount councils have spent on personal social services has risen from £9.73 billion in 2010 to 2011 to £9.98 billion in 2012 to 2013, the amount out of those budgets spent on elderly care has fallen in both actual and proportional terms over that period. From £3.45 billion, 35.5%, to £3.19 billion, 32%, in the current financial year.
There are 6.4.
This is Chrissy. The big picture, I think, is that people view the caring industry with, well, they see the news on the television, they see the bad carers working because they make the news. And they don't see, well, it's like any news story, you only see what they want you to see. And there's a lot that's going on underneath that's good that nobody sees. I know people who are looking into having care for whatever reason, and they always say, I don't want agency, you know, I don't want agency because, oh, they've had this experience or they've had a friend that's had an... And that's just what they don't want. Well, they do require now that for a carer you do have some training, the MVQs, but that is a completely different issue that I won't go into now. Well, no, the only thing I would say about the MVQs is that I think a part of caring is the ability to have empathy and understanding with your clients. And is not something, Well, it's very difficult to teach somebody those qualities, those abilities, because I think it doesn't matter what MVQ you've got. If you haven't got that innate ability, it's still, well, you're still not going to be a very good carer. I started caring about 12 years ago, after spending the majority of my working life working in an office. And I thought that I'd want to do something different, so something more meaningful and useful than shoving bits of paper around all day. I mean, when I first started, they sent me out with no training whatsoever, virtually no training. And they sent me to this lady who was a double-hander, so there was supposed to be 2 of us there, and I said to the other girl, I said, I hope you know what you're doing, because I haven't got a clue. And she said, no, I don't. Awfully, because we didn't know what we were doing. I mean, we were there about double the time we were meant to be. The client was non-weight bearing. I stood on a toe a couple of times and it made me feel really awful. We were there about double the amount of time because we didn't know her routine. Her husband was getting upset, etc. So I can understand why, or this is, well, one of the reasons why they're looking to improve the system with with the training and the MV, Oh, and the training you get now with agencies is much better now than it was, It is much improved. Oh no, they don't, a lot of them don't. I mean, I signed up to one, it must have been a couple of years ago. And the first thing she did to me was lie to me about how much I could possibly make a week. She started talking to me about another carer, although she didn't mention the carer by name. Yes, in a negative way. Or she started talking to me about a client in a fairly negative way, and yes, I think she did. She did mention her by her name, but only her Christian name. But to me, to start off with, that was a turn-off. To me, that was an unprofessional approach. But I went along with it. But I say go along, but I mean I had to do some work for her because I needed work. But then after a while I thought, well, this won't do. Because you're associated with them, aren't you? I don't like it. I really don't like the attitude.
This is Sheila. Well, actually, I started off as a home help, and that is going in and doing housework, and I did that for so many years, and gradually it changed because people needed more care, and that meant going in and getting them up in the morning, getting them washed if they couldn't wash themselves, getting them dressed, doing their hair or makeup for them, and you know, if you've got a carer coming in a little later or earlier than you know, make them their breakfast or their lunch or whatever you've got time for. And then I did the evenings with a friend, and, you know, we'd make them their dinner, make sure they took their tablets and everything like that, you see. Oh yeah, there was lots of lovely, lovely people. And they used to look forward to seeing them because we were such a jolly pair, you see. Me and my friend. Sheila and Maury. We were the best pair. Everybody loved us. But one particular man, I must tell you this, he was about 88. And he could stand up, but he couldn't walk. And we had a job of getting him into bed every night. So we said, can you dance? And then we'd get him undressed, and then my friend would get his pyjama trousers on with me holding him, and then she'd get his pyjama top on. And then we said, we walked. We said, come on, we'll have a dance. Quick, quick, slow, go backwards. You get him into bed. Couldn't get him into bed if you asked him to walk. He refuses to move. But ask him to go backwards with him leading, right, and get him into bed. No problems at all. Yeah. He was a lovely man. All the carers adored him. Everybody adored him. He was a lovely sort, he was. And I loved it, I did, because you had so many different types of people. All types of people. Ballet dancers, tightrope walkers, who couldn't walk no more. And you go in and get them in a chair and put them to bed. Oh, there were lots of nice carers, yeah. The younger ones don't care as much as us older ones. You know, they just do the job. They don't do it as they're supposed to do it, you know. But like I said, you've got to be that type of person who loves people, because that's what I do. I love people, you know. I'm not clever. I couldn't do a job like a manageress or anything like that. But because I love people, you know, you've got to cheer them up when they're unhappy. You've got to have the gift of the gab. I had one old lady, I must tell you this. She was about 103, and I couldn't care to eat. So every time I went, I took a sandwich with me. And I'd make her dinner, and I'd sit her down, and I'd say, look, I can't eat this sandwich all on my own. You've got to have something, because I can't eat this sandwich all on my own. So she'd say, all right, I'm sitting and eat a dinner. Couldn't get her to eat unless you were having something as well. And that's what you've got to do. You've got to love people. You've got to care for them, you know. Another one. I don't know if I should tell you this, but this is the type of thing you've got to put up with. So there's an old man, he was a Jewish man. I went in. I said, I'm here to do the cleaning and caring. And he said, get on the bed and spread your legs. That's what he said. Get on the bed and spread your legs. I thought, I got straight out of there, and I phoned up the office, and I said, I told them what happened, and they said, did you go in and clean? I said, no, I bleeding didn't. I got out there. I ain't going back in there. Let me think. Mr. Butcher, you know, with the letter I showed you. Well, it might have been Mr. Butcher, I don't know. But I had a gentleman who was about 90, and I just not so much caring for him because it varied. You know, I might just go and get his shopping and his pension, and do a bit of tidying up for him and things like that. And he said to me one day, he was a very tall man, lots of white hair, and he said, you know, I love you, you know. I said, do you? He said, you're such a nice lady, Sheila, I do love you. And he wrote that to his daughter. He wrote that to his daughter, that Sheila's such a lovely lady. Yeah. And because when he was dying, loving, I know what he had I know what it was cancer. He had a cancer on his ear, and it went all around his neck, and it was a lump. He had scabs and scabs on his ear. And every time I went, I said, is it hurting? No. Well, it should have hurt him. So I phoned the office, and I said, look, he's got a big growth on his neck. So they sent the doctor in, but the doctor was stupid and thought it was a carbuncle. There was no such thing as a carbuncle. So they must have phoned the health, but Mr. Butcher did tell me off about that. He said I shouldn't have notified the office. He was very cross about that. So they sent the other doctor in, and they sent him to the hospital, and he turned out he had cancer. Yeah, he had it all around his neck, all around. He had a big operation. And when you're a carer, you pick up things. I mean, you're not a nurse, but you pick up things, and you knew what it was. So after the operation, I went in to see him because he wanted to see me, and I gave him such a big hug, and he was so pleased to see me. But while I was in there, I noticed he had a crackling in his breathing, on his slide, just a little crackling. So I said to the nurse, he's got a chest infection. She said, how do you know? I said, I can hear it. Just a slight crackling. So I said, tell the doctor that the home care said she had a crackling at the sound of his breathing. And got pneumonia. And he died, love him. But he had a good old illness, didn't he? Oh, he was a lovely man, he was. He loved me, he did. That's what carers do. You get involved because you get so fond of them. And you get to know them for years and years and years. And when they go, it's really hard because it hurts. And you go to the funeral and you're just so fond of them. And it hurts especially if you get 2 or 3 go at the same time. Yeah. But most of them are very sweet people. Most of them are very lovely people. But there are a few very evil, wicked old ladies. They've got tongues like vipers and they're vicious and they're spiteful and they'll ring up and say, Sheila Bradley's not done a bit of work for me. All she wanted to do was sit down and have a cup of tea. Bloody liar. Been in, done her shopping, got a pension, got everything for her, showed her how much money she's got, and then she rings up the office. But that's only the bad side. You might get 3 out of 10. And those old ladies live to a very old age. All the good ones go early, see? But, oh yeah, I loved it, I did. If I had my time over, I'd do it again. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Anything else?
This is Angela. Can't get mine. There we are. Oh.
We've been a wonder. I mean, this might sound nervous to some people, but we did. We're married 4 to 6 years. Went out together 2 years before that, and he was just wonderful. I can't say no more. He was very laid back, a very loving man, a very emotional man. He showed us love, and wow, that was it. That was how he was. That was just how he was. Well, I mean, he wasn't all darlings and bunches of flowers and fancy presents. He wasn't that sort, but just genuinely loving, genuinely loving. A day went by when he wouldn't tell me how much he loved me. That was how he was. He used to do shift work, and he always left me a note. Love you, see you tonight. I still got him upstairs. Well, I mean, as good as Ray was, with his Louis body, I gotta admit, I used to fall short sometimes. Can't help it, can you? But you ask for forgiveness when you're a Christian, and on your I didn't do too bad then, because, well, you did just say it, and that was his nature. Very laid back person anyway, so that's all right. I was blessed with that. I said to my doctor at the time then, Dr. Green, I said, I want to do everything in my power to look after him at home. And they did. They said they did send all the help in. I had incontinence nurse, you name it, I've had it. So I can't fault my surgery. I've been blessed as well. The carers what I've had. Some people aren't as fortunate, but the people I was with have been, oh yeah, they've been absolutely wonderful. Kamari, they're called, and they're from Bath. Funny enough, I don't tend to read the desk in the paper, unless of course I'm looking for someone I've heard about. But I happened to glance at the paper the other day, and I seen this big picture of this lady, and I read about her life and what she did, and at the bottom it said, and thank you to all the carers, wonderful carers from Kamari. Yeah. No, I can't fault what I've had. Even when Ray was in that nursing home for 3 weeks, they were wonderful. They were, they were wonderful. Staff over there were wonderful. absolutely. Right down to the lady that come with the tea. She'd go in, see how he was, check he's all right, and I'd go over there, because I was over there all day, every day, and I'd go in, and she'd say, oh, I've been in to see him. He's all right, he's all right. He's not doing too bad. Of course, he couldn't walk, couldn't stand. Poor chap, he had to be hoisted to get to the bathroom. They couldn't get the food in him. And so I said to the doctor when she said, we can't feed him, I said, why? I said, well, what's the option? Well, she said he can have a operation where they where they put a tube in like what I had. And I said, oh no, I don't want him to go through all that. I said, I don't want him to go through that. I said, if they do that, I said, that's not going to mend his physical body. It's not going to mend his mind. I said, I don't want him to go through all that. I said to the doctor. And I said, well, I think now's the time, I said, when to make him comfortable. And if the end's coming, the end's coming. And that's it.
The need for confidence, with 1 million of them in severe poverty.
2 million people take on caring responsibilities for an ill, frail or disabled friend or relative each year. And this means that around 3 in 5 of us will care at some point in our lives.
Setting a lifetime cap on care costs of £75,000 will help just 10% of those needing care, whilst the majority will be left to struggle on with the third-rate service.
Following the introduction of the new health film,
This is Georgia. I started caring about, well, when I was 14 and a half. Yeah. Well, my father had died and that, and my mum couldn't afford pocket money, and in those days you did sort of go and work in shops and things from the age of 14. Yeah, a girl came up to me into the playground and said, Tina, her name was, I remember, I was sitting on the grass with my friends, and she came up to me and said, I hear you're looking for a job. And that was that. Yeah, I've seen a lot over my, well, couple of decades, yeah. No, there was no rules and regulations as such to follow, no. I was left on my own at 15 for an hour with a deceased body. People were locked in their rooms that had dementia, yeah. People were tied up with tights to commodes. Well, they'd need to go to the toilet, and otherwise they'd get up and walk about. So they tied them up, yeah. Oh, it was normal. Well, it was normal because I didn't know any better, and I didn't really talk to my mum about it. And at that age, I thought it was normal. Oh, and because I thought that, well, adults knew best. Oh, well, I suppose in some places it still does happen. I mean, you've got all the legislations and that and such, but I mean, you've seen the news programmes and the panorama programmes and things happening. So, unfortunately, it probably still does. Yeah, well, in those days there was no protocol. There was no the public was well ignored. And if you had an older carer who did things wrong, the younger carer coming into caring wouldn't have a very good mental. Yeah, and they'd go on to, bad apple all the way through. Oh, no, they discourage relationships, yeah. You get written warnings and you get disciplinaries because you're not allowed to cross that line into friendship. You're genuinely not allowed. If one of your patients goes into hospital, you're genuinely not allowed to visit them in hospital. No, it's part of the contract with the agency. Well, it's a business, yeah. But I mean, you do have to draw the line somewhere, don't you? With I mean, you hear about bad things happening with people dying and wills and that. So I guess. But I mean, it's very difficult not to cross that line. But I don't have that anymore. I'm independent. I've got my own rules. You see, if people have advocates, they have a voice if they haven't got a voice themselves. It's the people without any loved ones or family or someone to look out for them. They are the vulnerable ones. They are the ones open for abuse. Oh no. Nah, I've had my moments, yeah, but I won't. Well, I was 26. I was working in a rest home before I came here, actually. I was 26 and I was with this lady. And I'd always got told, if you get annoyed, because some of the patients weren't always nice, if you get annoyed, you leave the room. And I left the room. And as I did so, I stuck my tongue out. And I felt so awful. Because I mean, what a thing for her. I'm sorry, yes, upsetting me now. I mean, what a thing for her to have to see. I mean, me just walking out the room and going, I mean, do you know what I mean? I should have just left the room. I should have just left the room, but I had to have, and you know what? That taught me. If you haven't got anything nice to say, you leave the room. Oh, I got a written warning as well once, but that was from an awful, awful lady. I was in a rest home and I heard her shouting at this old woman. She hadn't put her hearing aids in. I heard her shouting at her. And this other lady, blood sugar level low, shouting at her too, calling her awful. She locked me out. She shut me out of the rest home, yeah. And I thought, what do I do now? How dare she shout at these little old ladies, just waking up, just wanting to have a cup of tea or something, shouting at them. What do you want? What do you want? Awful, awful mad woman. Where did they find her? I mean, yeah, she was agency, yeah. He kept her on. I wrote a lovely long letter, yeah. Mad woman. No, it is someone's life, isn't it? I mean, you have to have empathy, and you have to have sympathy, because you have to try and understand what it's like. They're not just a name, they're not just a number. It's their life, isn't it? I mean, well, I personally don't like meeting new people, but that's just a personal thing. But I mean, you don't want someone going in and being like, hello, I'm your carer, blah, 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 you know? Because, like, they don't want someone coming in and taking over their life, someone overconfident. So I start off slow. Well, it's a weakness and a strength. And I start off with trepidation, and I build up with reassurance. Because generally they're just as nervous as you are. And I mean, it's very hard for someone to invite a stranger into their house. And you know, people do say that as you get older, you retreat into childhood. But I think there should be a different term for it. Well, I feel just appreciated for my knowledge, really. But I guess that would be different if I was a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old, you know? God, I sometimes forget how old I am. I'm 45 now. Yeah!
This is Daisy. What I found were the actual professional people were useless. But the supporting agencies like Age Concern and the people like that, they have something over here called early intervention. And they're very good, yeah. They used to ring me up and see how I was. And all the professionals let my dad down in hospital and just took 2 weeks to kill him off. Sad to say, it's still happening with people. Well, while I was there virtually all the time and quite able to speak up, they didn't take any notice. So, for example, when he first got admitted to the ward with a broken hip, I pointed out to the nurse, the admissions nurse, that he'd got dementia, gave his tablets over, and I said, he doesn't know why he's in here, you know, he's not aware, he can't walk. And he keeps trying to get out of bed to go to the toilet, so, you know, I stress that over and over again. And I learned, not because they told me, they didn't tell me or my brother, but I learned that, well, he had tried to get out of bed, and of course with a broken hip can't walk on it. And they found him in the morning under the bed. Been on the floor for hours under the bed, even though I told them. Well, I was told that this nurse said, well, he seems quite coherent, quite lucid to me, so they completely ignored the fact that I told them, the fact that, no, he wasn't on those tablets anymore, he'd just come off them. They didn't take my word for it. And that the fact that they came back with the fact that he seemed quite lucid, I mean, what do they want? People to be completely gaga before they say they've got dementia? They didn't apologise to me, no. Not till I made a complaint, because actually at the complaint meeting, which took 13 months after I'd at last arranged a meeting between the various people, the matron and the ward manager, I very sadly learnt that actually the same thing happened on the second night. And I learnt that 13 months later. And neither of those occasions did they tell. As I say, we went in one morning, and this nurse said all trivially, "Oh, you know, your father's been found under the bed this morning." And I said, "What, you didn't think to ring us up?" And they said, "No, they didn't think it was important enough." And this nurse said, "Happens all the time. Happens all the time with our dementia patients." It was awful. It was a terrible, terrible thing. It was like a living nightmare. The fact that they didn't care. He ended up having to have another operation on the hip Christmas Day. Yes, it was a terrible, terrible thing. And what I don't understand is why these people don't speak up. I went in one day, and this is going to sound funny, I know, but this doctor said, "I want to speak to you," and he took me into this linen cupboard, Samantha. And he said, "If you ask me outside, I'll deny it," he said. "But I'm telling you," he said, "things have gotten terrible here. Terrible, terrible goings on." This is from a doctor. Yeah, not a male nurse. Why don't these people speak out? Well, he's telling me about in a cupboard that I can't repeat outside because he'll deny it. Wow. Maybe it's like the police force, you know, what I've experienced with the NHS is they don't want anything bad said about what's under their control. I think it reflects badly on them. It's all a cover-up. Well, it's criminal, isn't it?
There are around 550,000 people in England acting as primary carers for people with dementia. Carers for people with dementia save the nation nearly $7 billion every year. Research shows that carers of people with dementia experience greater strain and distress than carers of other older people.
Age UK said, funding pressures are resulting in many committed care workers becoming overstretched, with staff forced to choose between rushed visits.
This is Pat. I gave up working because Mum wouldn't let anyone else look after her, and it got to the point where she was in such immense pain that something had to be done. So I talked it over with my husband, and I talked it over with my brother, and we decided to move them from where they lived because they were living in a split-level masonette with too many stairs. We approached the council over there to rehouse them into a flat, but unfortunately, because my father has chronic emphysema, they have to sleep in separate bedrooms, and the council could only offer us 2 flats with 1 bedroom. But his breathing is hideous, you know. When he's sleeping, it can be quite alarming when you hear this huge and you think, you know, he's gasping his last breath, but he's not. It's just the way he is. So he's meant to be on an oxygen tank 16 hours a day, and he'll take it or leave it as he pleases. He does use a nebuliser, which he roughly uses 4 to 5 times a day, and he seems to prefer that rather than having an oxygen tank hanging off of his face for 16 hours at a time. But I think they were both great parents to us, and it got to the point in my life where I felt like they looked after me and my brother, and it's only fair that in return they received the favour, the deed, call it what you will. The council's offered us everything. It's funny, before they were ill enough to involve all the nurses and medical teams, you couldn't get anything out of them. And it's only when they became more ill that, because we had to buy most of the equipment, that the things they offer has been absolutely amazing, you know. And so now that they're aware of how ill they're, well, ill is not the right word, poorly, they said, why didn't you contact us before? And I said, well, we did. When we did, you weren't interested. So they went on their books, so to speak. So now the things they offer is absolutely amazing. I mean, you know, I could have saved a fortune, but I can't praise the doctors enough. Life is one huge round of hospital visits, doctor's appointments, making sure their medication's up to date, checking to make sure they can actually be bothered to take their medication. Because my dad's argument is, I can't take these pills for the rest of my life. And it's like, well, Dad, if you don't take these pills, you won't have a rest of your life. So, but my mum is very, very different. After her illness last year, she lost 4 stone in weight. And bless her, she's 4 foot nothing, and she's a bag of bones. So, and she has no appetite whatsoever. And she's had a couple of falls. Her most recent one, bless her, was when she was having an afternoon nap. And she's gone to get out of bed and got her leg caught in the duvet and tripped up and fallen and smacked her jawline open and her earlobe. And I get this little phone call saying, I've fallen out of my bed, can you come and help me? Yes, of course. Are you okay? Are you hurt? Only my pride. And it's only when I've got down there that side of her face is away from me. And only when I've gone to pick her up that I've actually realised the damage she's done. So they are a huge worry. But like I say, it's my dad. He's under so many clinics. He's under 6 different clinics at Whipps Cross. You know, I ought to have my own uniform, a designated tasking area. He's just got so many things wrong with him. But my mum my mum, she doesn't like strangers coming in. And because the nurses see how much I do for her, they think it's a bit too much for one person. But she's had numerous amounts of offers of help. So some days it's rewarding, and some days you just think, as long as they're safe, they're secure, they're warm, they're fed, and you come away with not a sense of achievement, but a mild satisfaction that you've done your best for today, and you can come home without worrying about them too much. Waltham Forest Council's offered us such a lot, but they point blank refused any help. But the only people my dad will let in is the respiratory team, and that's just to make sure and check he's okay. And I hate it when he answers the phone, because it sounds like you're having a dirty phone call. I'll ring him up and I'll say, hi Dad, it's your daughter. And it's only me and my brother, and he'll say, is that you, Patricia? She's like, who else is it going to be? Is there some secret daughter I don't know about? But so each day is different. My mum's got the district nurse coming in at the moment, and because of her condition, she's got where she's so immobile, she's developed ulcers on both of her legs. And I must admit, watching them wash and clean them twice a week, I have to leave the room. She's in agony. But it's just at the point where, you know, everything's wearing out basically, and it's just the way it is. So, yeah, and I do everything for them. I do the cooking, the cleaning, the washing. They won't have a window cleaner or a gardener, and that's pushing it, because gardening I hate. But my main chores are ring them up each morning to make sure they're okay, and when I get down there, give my dad his eye drops, and because he's lost sight in one eye. Honestly, Catherine, the list is endless. But I must admit, he's got a lot better since I had my knee injury. And but his attitude is, oh, what the hell, we'll be dead tomorrow. It's just his philosophy, and they've both requested that next time they're hospitalised, they don't wish to be resuscitated. If they, which was actually quite shocking, actually. My mum's illness last year, we lost her 3 times, and she had the last rites and everything. But it was a silent occasion with all of us around her, ready for her to go. But she pulled through. That's what I admire about her. She's a tough little cookie.
is Beth. Started caring for my mother in 2002. She went in for a hip operation. When she came out, it became very apparent that she was never ever going to be able to look after herself on her own again. That's when it all started. Started from there. I would only want to send her to a care home if she was so physically ill that I couldn't cope with her any longer. Because my mother had always had a fear of going into a care home when she was younger and never ever wanted to go into that sort of situation. And I feel that, you know, we've had our ups and downs as mother and daughter, but she's been a good mum and she's looked after us through some very difficult circumstances. So, and I didn't see the point of putting her in a home and spending an absolute fortune in fees when I could do the same job with myself. Now also, this isn't the norm. The majority of nurses in the nursing care is excellent. Just occasionally you'll get a very unkind nurse who could be incredibly cruel. And I didn't want to expose my mum, who was so vulnerable, to that sort of situation because she wouldn't have been able to tell anybody. And so we decided that as far as possible we would look after her as long and as far as we could. Right, one lady was exceptionally cruel in that we had a new lady and she obviously needed to be reassured, taken to her room, introduced to the people that were going to be looking after her. What actually happened was she was taken to a room where she was quite comfortable, and the staff went in to see her, introduced themselves, and the lady that was in there first, one of the nurses, realised that this poor lady had a stroke. She couldn't swallow. Because of that, she couldn't speak. So she knew exactly what was going on. All her intelligence was there, and she's obviously very frightened to be surrounded by a whole group of people she couldn't communicate with. But this nurse, the nurse that was in there first, realised this, and others of us were just inside the door. And this nurse just looked at this lady and said, "What is it that we have here? And what is it?" What? The money I receive from the state is a very generous £55 a week, which, considering that's 24/7, 7 days a week, works out a very, very good value. So I'm exceptionally good value at £55 a week. If I was to put my mother into a home, it would be a minimum of £740 a week. £740. Over £100 a day that I'm doing for less than a fiver. No, society doesn't value carers. They're the forgotten people. Society says, well, you love that person, so you do it. You've married that person, so you'll do it. That's not an answer, that's a cop-out. Because if I'm looking after someone, I've got needs and wants and desires that I'm every bit as entitled to as they are. No, society says, society just doesn't value carers. And that's a shame. That's society's loss, not mine.
This is Cat.
I started caring when I had left Falmouth University, and I didn't know what to do with myself. And my mum was having carers come in at the time, although the care company we had weren't very good. They'd send one carer when we needed two, and often the carer that did send. I mean, I wouldn't expect to know that. I wouldn't expect everyone to know where everything was, but you do sort of like to think they'd been briefed beforehand, and the carer would arrive and that you know nothing, and that's not their fault. But that's when it gets a bit awkward, and that's when it's not great for the patient. Yes, I suppose I was sort of protective in a sense of, because of my mum's situation. I think people would often treat her like she didn't know what was going on, and that was one of the most frustrating parts. Because we had this lady who came in to put my mum to bed, and my mum was watching something on the telly. And I was sitting in the sitting room with her, and the carer came and sat down next to her, and then started from her pockets putting rubber gloves on. Oh, and I thought she's got every right to do that. That's good health and safety. But I just thought she could have done it in another room, or maybe had her hands in her pockets so that you didn't see the gloves. Or maybe she could have done it when actually the gloves were needed, if they were needed. So yeah, that was just a bit. We were just sat watching telly, and gloves were on. And then she came over to my mother, and she said, and I'm sure she was only just trying to make conversation, but she said, so when do you normally go to bed? And that's a perfectly reasonable question, but my mum just sort of gave her this look that was sort of like. And sometimes you just think they just want to put someone to bed and then just go home themselves, and I don't blame them, but you don't want to rush anyone, do you? Oh, well, yes. So yes, I knew what it was like from inside, from having carers come in. Oh well, apparently now it's all about health and safety now, and apparently with care now, to work in a care home or in anyone's home, you must have an NVQ3 in health and safety care, which I do not have. But obviously, because I don't work for an agency, so it's different. It's different. Oh no! I have said in the past that actually for an agency, by agency standards, because I just work for your grandmother, and because I feel I'm very attached to her. I do know that by agency standards they would say, well, and not back off, but they would say you need to be a bit more professional, because, well, at the end of the day, I'm not part of your family, and well, what I do just try to do for her is just try to make it as homely as possible for her, instead of just having a sort of like this random stranger come in with a routine every day and everything's the same. And if your mum's out, I'll say, well, Connie's out doing shopping. Or if you and your brother are at university, I'll say, well, Zoe's at university. And it's just really nice to see her face just light up. Well, and it's obvious she's so proud of you. But no, I definitely feel valued. it's just such a joy to do this and to meet so many people and just to be part of lots of lovely people's lives. And if I didn't do it, I don't know what I would do. Probably volunteering, something like that. Yeah, I'd have to do something.
£6 million funding gap in 2012 to 13.
Bills for long-term care in old age are to be capped at £75,000 in England, and the £1 billion to be funded by dragging more people into the inheritance tax net, it has been announced. Whilst there are many other things that need to be done to prepare for an ageing population, these reforms do herald a historic change.
Thank you very much for coming. If anyone needs to leave, they can. But we're just going to have a sort of 20-minute-ish, we'll see how long it is, discussion with you, just about 20 minutes, just about caring and how much you know about caring industry and stuff like that. So, that's it. The first question I sort of wanted to ask you is, how many of you have been carers or know someone who's been a carer? Like, just if you raise your hand or something. Yeah. See, because the statistic is that 3 in 5 people become carers in their lifetime. And so it's something that is incredibly relevant to everyone, because everyone gets old, and everyone will need someone to look after them. And so this is just sort of about trying to start awareness early, and especially with university students, young people.
And we definitely feel like this is an important issue to be talking about in light of the recent events with the NHS, and the fact that there are more people, we're living longer, and we're popping out babies more. And so care is an issue that we really do need to be talking about and thinking about, but that we feel is really ignored. And so we want to know, we want to ask you these questions and get some responses. So if you're silent, that's not going to be helpful.
I think everyone might agree here that the care system in the UK needs to be reformed, and it needs to be reworked to be more efficient and be more caring. So we just wanted to ask some of you what your view of the caring industry is, if you have any view, or if you don't have a view, you can be like, well, I didn't actually know there was anything that wrong. Anyone?
I think it's especially the financial aspect of it, which obviously you made quite obvious in yours, that it is £600-700 a week. From personal experience, it was so demanding amount of money that my great-grandparents were taken out of the home, and it's that kind of aspect, and person look after them, and I think no one really realises until you're in that place, and the fact that it's rising is a really massive issue. I think you portrayed that really, really well.
Because there's the... Do you want to talk about 700?
Oh yeah, there's recently been a £75,000 spending cap on government spending for carers, and that's ridiculous, since once that stops, they have to pay towards more care, and people can't afford it. Like, Pat, for example, bought all the equipment for her parents to use, and the council didn't really give her any help until there was enough evidence for her to get that equipment. But it's only because she was able to pay off her mortgage that she was able to care for her parents. So what about other people who can't afford to do that? How are they going to support their families? And what are the issues surrounding that?
I think in terms of care homes and agencies, the problem is in the management. You've exemplified that already, but it's that the actual carers are constrained, they're stuck. So they are giving poor care, but they can't do any different because of the way they are managed and the way they're trained.
I guess this discussion has to be pretty quick, so we will sort of, not going to move on, but we'll sort of come back and touch on hopefully everything. But yeah, that is a huge tension between people who have professional training and who have their NVQs, which is National Vocational Qualifications, which everyone must have normally for certain jobs. And between those like Kat, who was my last girl, who has no training at all. She trained. She cared for a mother who had cancer, and then after her mother died, she then carried on caring, and she was accepted by because our family accepted her just because she came. And she was like, I have no training, but I'm good, and she proved she was good. And so we need to sort of think about how it's sort of almost measuring care and if people actually care and truly care. And it's very hard to
measure that, I think, oh sorry Tim.
No, you carry on then.
I think one of the biggest issues that we have explored and that's been coming up in our research and hopefully, will communicate it, or if not now as I'm saying it, is that there is this big thing of how do you measure empathy? And there's something that an NVQ, it's not a tick box, but I am very good at being empathetic. This is a skill that isn't learnt sort of in a classroom. But how do you measure that? Because obviously there is merit in learning how to lift people and the right procedures. But then if you don't have the right mind frame, and that's a really, really important issue, and that something that we feel needs to be taken into consideration when talking about care as something that's really, really important.
And especially, Mia, what you were saying about the people higher up, the management. There's also that aspect, especially with older carers, if they're not doing a good job, and they're the ones who are training the younger carers. So the younger carers, like in the news recently, when the young carers were abusing the woman and sort of doing parodies of her and stuff like that. It can justifiably be said that they might have learnt that from a senior carer. And you can see how complex and how deep-rooted poor care is.
Did you have a chance to, or opportunity to talk to any management people on management level, or did you want to kind of purely portray it from the kind of different types of experiences of carers from the ground?
I think it's really difficult to speak to certain people in the care industry. I think what was shown in a certain monologue here with Daisy is that people don't want anything bad said about what's going on. And there's a panorama program recently where people went in secretly, and this is how you find out. And so getting somebody on management, that we didn't, and it would be very hard to.
I tried.
I
tried once, and she was just like.
I can't really come at it from a UK perspective, but my sister's actually the director of nursing of a hospital in Ireland. So I know firsthand, obviously, that there are a lot of cuts, but it's people who, managers and teams that can actually still make it work in the economic situation in which they're in. And again, it goes back to that empathy. That's a personal thing that's in here, and if you have it, you'll make it work regardless.
It's also, literally going on that, because it seems the government doesn't seem to want to focus so much on the elderly. They're more interested, justifiably, in the young and the young care. They sort of just forget about it, they've had their time, that's done. But the people have to sort of stretch resources and self-sacrifice is not there anymore, but is a huge part of it. How much of yourself do you give for this person, and then you normally don't receive much in return. You receive their health and
I think it's awareness as well. People don't realise how much care you give them until people go into hospital and they're like, oh, how have you been dealing with this? Do you know what I mean? So it's that, it's I think there needs to be some sort of, I don't know, some sort of, something that gives more, that helps more informal carers as well as professionals.
And I think that will help if if there's a change in the view of how society views the elderly and how society views growing old. Because I was reading somewhere about this great place in Switzerland that it was for, I think it was for dementia patients, and it was they had like archery lessons, and they had go-karting and stuff like that.
Parties and stuff.
And like that's like celebrating life until the end. It's not saying you've reached this age, you're now
invalid.
Clearly there's a resonance with what you're talking about, and particularly when Zoe was mentioning reform. I'm thinking of, I think it was the Francis report recently into the mid-staff situation, where his prognosis was that it wasn't about reform per se or changing the system yet again, because, you know, if anything, it needs stability. And it's not about scapegoating, but it was about, you know, putting care back into the system and moving away from box checking. So that was one thing, and maybe your reflections on that. Clearly, many of the points you're making are about also the lack of funding that's devoted to that. And I think it's interesting that you raise the notion of childcare, because there's much interest and movement around, you know, funding nursery places, and both the care of the young and the elderly was previously not considered a function or a job of the state to do. But clearly we've determined that the state, for reasons of empowerment to free up people to go to work or whatever, that money is invested there. And I wonder whether you think that the move towards greater childcare will allow the care of the elderly to follow in its wake, or a different argument needs to be made?
I think you've raised some really important issues. I think that it correlates that, yes, you know, you need to care, but it shows your priorities with the funding that you give. So you can say as much as you want that it's great to care for an elderly person, but if you're giving all of the money to a different thing, that just speaks volumes. And if you really care, then you're going to put the money into the resources. I think it's great that people fund for childcare, and I think it's necessary. But I read a fact, I think it's Helena Hurlot says, well, not fact, but her opinion, is that the childcare system is, the age, caring for the elderly is like 10 years behind caring for children. And I think that's really important, and I think that as long as there's a focus on caring as a general thing and not just caring for one specific thing, that there will be more of a giving out for all things. If you just say, look what we're doing for caring for children, you're shining a spotlight on that and ignoring other things which we're trying to disseminate with our piece, like, look at this.
But it's so hard with funding, sort of going on from what you're saying, to decide who's a worthy cause and to decide who's not such a worthy cause.
Because it's like there's no value, there's no future. It's like almost there's no future for older people. That's not how it should be, or I don't think it's how it should be. I don't know what you think, but
No, thinking and responding to your comments, it strikes me that if the emphasis is placed more on it freeing up, liberating those people who, you know, thereby give up a career or work or whatever else, then really the age of the person that you're caring for becomes less important and less kind of emotive, and maybe that is a way to reframe it.
Yeah, that is a very good way to reframe it.
I mean, one of the problems with this, and I think it came through very clearly in your piece, is that empathy, you know, is what has been appealed for and to. And I think the comment you make is the same, that we care and therefore we do it, we help. But it goes directly contrary to capitalism and to social Darwinism, which is about progress, and those are the values of our society, and they're in direct conflict. So in some ways, to change this, we have to change our commitment to social Darwinism and capitalist economy. So that's a big ask, and actually when you say how much value do you put on care, I think the society's told us how much value they care, you know. And I think that linking with Tim's idea of the young, I mean, I think we need young people to care and not be so competitive and be in a system where from very little they're learning those values. I'm not sure we're teaching values of caring either. So I think that there's a number of layers of awareness around taking care for another human being. And we see it on an everyday level where I'm the most important person and therefore I can have 2 parking spaces if I want. You know, and that same level feeds down. So I think that it's a kind of systemic problem that isn't just about funding.
Yeah. I think that if you not forced, but you have to care for someone, I think from a young age, you become extremely aware of how little your needs are compared to theirs. And it's not. Everyone has it. Everyone has empathy and care in them. They just need to be taught and to learn how to.
But it's interesting because the education system at the moment is obviously going for a huge push towards sciences, towards mathematics, away from the arts in some kind of way, away from the humanities, and we are forgetting what it's like to be a human.
Yeah.
We're forgetting that we actually need to show children to put themselves in, if you like, into another person's shoes, to be able to understand, to be able to feel where they're coming from. And if we're removing young people from humanities, we can't put them into situations like this in a safe environment of the classroom.
Yeah.
But also it's hard to kind of quantify, like of course it's hard to quantify empathy, but like if you need to have an NVQ or something as a young person to start out in this, it's so, I think that would put quite a few people who are genuinely empathetic, it might put them off. Like my brother, for example, was very troubled, very difficult until my grandma was very ill, and he was wonderful with her. And it was such a joy to see that change in him, but he's not an academic person at all, so he won't do it because he doesn't want to go and study for an MVQ.
That's one of the main.
And it's so bad.
That's one of the main problems with the MVQ, because some of the people who could be the best carers cannot answer the questions, cannot
respond to
bullshit. Excuse my language, but
so like someone in this room could probably easily pass the MVQ test
without giving a damn
and then become a carer, but whether someone who really wants to and who's very good wouldn't. So
I met a German girl who worked for a year in elderly people's care home as part of national service, which many countries have, and I like the idea of civilian national service. I wonder, especially for getting young people into the spirit of it, and that we've got an ageing population, and we're going to have to face lots of the challenges that Japan is facing at the moment, for instance. I wonder what you think of national service in that respect.
That's what I was sort of getting towards, but without being like, we should do that. And with, if you have the experience, you learn how to actually have empathy.
Very quickly, because it is 2. Just last point. Lots of the carers that we actually spoke to, and we didn't put it in because obviously there's so much, but what they spoke about was getting people in to shadow what they do, and they're like, that's the best way that we could think to show that sort of thing, and that sort of links with national service, the idea of shadowing and seeing it. And I think what's come out in Beth's monologue was that society sort of doesn't care, but also the idea that she says it's the people that don't see it, they have a different opinion. If they did it, they change their mind, and I think that's quite key, really. So, but if you want to ask any more questions, then you can outside.
And also because we're planning to create a petition on Avow's/38 degrees. We're not quite sure what the petition's going to be, but we want to make sure that something happens. Like, as the government sees, people think that something has to happen. We have an email list that you can write your name down on outside if you are sort of interested. We'd email you obviously what the petition is, and then you get to sign up to it if you wanted to. But yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Before everybody leaves.